Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Well, you play the kartals. Actually, Dmitri, you play the kartals. And Ananda, you get me the other drum. Pijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashoda Nandana Vajjana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Vajjana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Astottara Sri Srimad. His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Astottara Sri Srimad. His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavin ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Now, unfortunately, I forgot my book with its marker, but I'm pretty sure on text number 8. If you What do you think, Anand? We did that one. Yes. Next number 8. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 9th day of February 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in the second chapter, contents of the Gita summarized, text 8, page 71. Nahi prapashyami mamapanudyad yachokam uchoshanam indriyanam avapya bhumav asapatnam ridham rajam suranam apichadipatyam nahi papashyami mamapanudyad yachokam avapya bhuma vasapatnam ridham rajang suranam apichadipatyam nahi papashyami mamapanudyad yachokam avapya bhuma vasapatnam ridham rajang suranam apichadipatyam nahi papashyami mamapanudyad yachokam avapya bhuma vasapatnam ridham rajang suranam apichadipatyam nahi papashyami mamapanudyad yachokam avapya bhumam asapatnam ridham rajang suranam apichadipatyam nahi papashyami mamapanudyad yachokam avapya bhumav asapatnam ridham rajam suranam apichadipatyam nahi papashyami mamapanudyad yachochamuchoshamindriyanam avapya bhuma vasapatnam ridham rajang suranam apichadipatyam. Maraji. Nahi papashyami mamapanudyad yachokam avapya bhuma asapatnam ridham rajang suranam apichadipatyam nahi papashyami mamapanudyad yachokam avapya bhuma asapatnam ridham rajam suranam apichadipatnam. Zoomland.
Nahi prapashyami mama panudyad
Nahi papashyami mamapanudyad
yat shokam uchoshanam indriyanam
Yachokamachoshanamindriyanam
avapya bhumam asapatnam ridam
Avapya bhuma vasapatnam ridham
rajam suranam api chadi patyam.
Rajang Suranam Abhichari Na, do not. He certainly, Prapashyami, I see, Mama, my, Apanudyat, can drive away, yet that which Shokam, in lamentation, Uchoshanam, drying up, Indriyanam, of the senses, Avapya, achieving, Bhumao, on the earth, Asapatnam, without rival, Ridham, prosperous, Rajyam, kingdom, Suranam, of the demigods, Api, even Cha, also, Adipatyam, supremacy. Translation: Arjuna says to Krishna, I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like that of the demigods in heaven. Purport: Although Arjuna was putting forward so many arguments based on knowledge of the principles of religion and moral codes, it appears that he was unable to solve his real problem without the help of the spiritual master, Lord Sri Krishna. He could understand that his so-called knowledge was useless in driving away his problems, which were drying up his whole existence, and it was impossible for him to solve such perplexities without the help of a spiritual master like Lord Krishna. Academic knowledge, scholarship, high position, etc., are all useless in solving the problems of life. Help can be given only by a spiritual master like Krishna. Therefore, the conclusion is that a spiritual master who is 100% Krishna conscious is the bona fide spiritual master, for he can solve the problems of life. Lord Chaitanya said that one who is a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, regardless of his social position, is the real spiritual master. I'll say, you say, Kiba vipra kiba nasi shudra kene noi. Ye Krishna tattva veta se guru hoy. It does not matter whether a person is a Vipra, learned scholar in Vedic wisdom, or is born in a lower family, or is in the renounced order of life. If he is a master in the science of Krishna, he is the perfect and bona fide spiritual master. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 8, 128. So without being a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, no one is a bona fide spiritual master. It is also said in the Vedic literature, Shat karma nipano vipro mantra tantra visharadaha avaishnavo guru nasyad vaishnava shvapacho guruhu. A scholarly Brahmin, expert in all subjects of Vedic knowledge, is unfit to become a spiritual master without being a Vaishnav, or expert in the science of Krishna consciousness. But a person born in a family of a lower caste can become a spiritual master if he is a Vaishnav or Krishna conscious. Padma Puran. The problems of material existence, birth, old age, disease, and death, cannot be counteracted by accumulation of wealth and economic development. In many parts of the world, there are states which are replete with all facilities of life, which are full of wealth and economically developed. Yet the problems of material existence are still present. They are seeking peace in different ways, but they can never achieve real happiness only if they consult Krishna. They can achieve real happiness only if they consult Krishna or the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which constitute the science of Krishna, through the bona fide representative of Krishna, the man in Krishna consciousness. If economic development and material comforts could drive away one's lamentations for family, social, national, international inebrieties, then Arjuna would not have said that even an unrivaled kingdom on earth or supremacy like that of the demigods in the heavenly planets would be unable to drive away his lamentations. He sought, therefore, refuge in Krishna consciousness, and that is the right path for peace and harmony. Economic development or supremacy over the world can be finished at any moment by the cataclysms of material nature. Even elevation into a higher planetary situation, as men are now seeking on the moon planet, can also be finished at one stroke. The Bhagavad Gita confirms this. Chine punye matyalokam visanti When the results of pious activities are finished, one falls down again from the peak of happiness to the lowest status of life. Many politicians of the world have fallen down in that way. Such downfalls only constitute more causes for lamentation. Therefore, if we want to curb lamentation for good, then we have to take shelter of Krishna, as Arjuna is seeking to do. So Arjuna asked Krishna to solve this problem indefinitely, and that is the way of Krishna consciousness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this is the last of Arjuna's verses in which he is laying forward the argument for not fighting, and also simply unburdening his heart here to Krishna and surrendering to him in the end. And in a matter of a few verses here, he's given us a kind of a snapshot of the human condition. Because sooner or later, in everyone's life, there comes a situation which you can't solve by any of the means that you've solved all your problems up to now. There's always a further, just by the force of time, the very first, for instance, the body, as we know, everyone knows, either directly or by just life experience, that the body is a fragile machine, and it's subject to failure, either catastrophic failure or bit by bit piecemeal failure. And when you think about it, any solutions you're trying to apply to a problem involve the body, the brain, the senses, your vital energy, all have to be applied in any situation. We take them for granted, but you can't take them for granted. This afternoon I visited our old friend Madhusudan Prabhu, who's still suffering from his bout with COVID, and he's struggling there in bed in the house. And his daughter called me and said, "We'd really like to see you." I went over and saw him. And he's gamely facing the situation, but he's it's a big shock in any situation. Suddenly you're faced with death or disability or whatever it may be. And at that time, whatever we have in the way of spiritual assets, that's when they really come in handy. When you can look philosophically at your situation and have faith in the teachings right here we're going to hear in the second chapter, that there's no death. Krishna keeps it, he goes through 20 verses of a lesson on the soul. And Abhinashi to tad vidhi yena sarvamidam tatam. Abhinashi cannot be destroyed. That which is pervading the body, your consciousness, will never be destroyed. Never was the time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall never cease to be. The Jayate Mirite Vakadashan. Again and again, in all different kinds of ways, he's impressing on Arjuna that the real self never dies. And so all of your lamentation about killing your relatives and killing your friends and your teacher is misplaced in the face of the higher purpose of this battle. It's not just an ordinary war, and Arjuna has said there, if all this is about is me getting a kingdom, forget it, I'm leaving the battlefield. I will never be happy, just with if that is our motive, and that's the result of this, sole result, then I'm out of here. There's no way I can enjoy 1 minute in that kingdom. It's totally soaked with the blood of the people who I love. And all these other aspects, the ruination of society that he saw, with the killing of the men and the pollution of the women and all these things. So the material reason for fighting this battle is off the table, as far as Arjuna is concerned. But he understands that there's a higher purpose here, that Krishna is with him, and he wants this battle to take place. And he will lay out all the reasons why Arjuna should fight. In the end, of course, he agrees to fight. But we also need, in our battle, we're kind of on our own battlefield here. We need this kind of knowledge. Otherwise, whatever solutions we have are just Maya's trick. They're not solutions at all. They just keep us more and more entangled in this material energy. And so we're very fortunate to have Srila Prabhupada's wonderful presentation of this Bhagavad Gita as it is, as he so much stressed. And again throughout the Gita, he will explain how this is the real source, and Krishna explains also the source of happiness, the source of safety, the source of can I say, mental health, depression. Arjuna is suffering depression here, lamentation. All of these are emotional and mental states. All of that is addressed by the process of Krishna consciousness, real Krishna consciousness. So that's why the Bhagavad Gita never goes out of style. It's never obsolete. How can knowledge of the soul and God and our eternal relationship ever be obsolete? It can't. It can seem to us in our ignorant state it's irrelevant. I don't have time for that. Yes. But it's the most important knowledge that we can have. Michael, pick up the mic. Yes.
So, what?
I said yes, please.
That's one thing I really love about this path. That it does.
Don't rest your arm on the book like that.
You told me that just one time. You need to tell me so. So.
I know it's awkward. Yeah.
I love that it removes that idea of death, ultimate death, like you've done. But I'm not seeing that. Does it alleviate? I know it doesn't eliminate. Does it even alleviate the suffering part of growing older and all those things you mentioned, falling apart or a catastrophic illness or something like that? So the death part, yeah. But what about the suffering?
Well, that's also addressed. Now, the suffering, of course, is going to be there. I mean, in other words, I'm not going to give myself an example, but we saw with Srila Prabhupada that, yes, he became, what would you call, bedridden. He couldn't get out of bed. He couldn't eat anything, and so forth. But we didn't see the same kind of agony that would be there in an ordinary person. The doctor came. This is Prabhupada's, say, last couple of months. He really wasn't eating, and so he became very, very thin. And the doctor came and saw him and said, because any ordinary person in this situation would be crying out in agony because there's no cushion for the nerves, But Prabhupada would do these amazing things. Someone would come and to visit him. He had visitors would come. And quite often, I wasn't there, but I heard about, he would ask, oh, have you had any prasadam? If you knew the person, how was your wife doing? And people would burst into tears. Here he was in this condition that was painful to see, and yet he was still concerned and empathetic with the others. And so there's also this aspect of, what is it? Where does the suffering come from? It comes from the mind focusing on the painful limb, whatever it may be. If the mind is fixed somewhere else, you may feel it, but not the same way. Even on an ordinary sense, the football players, they get an injury, then after the game, they really realize. Or on a battlefield. Yeah, generally, but there's also a way, and this is dealt with in the Shastra. In this Sadhu Sangashika, with the teachings of Lord Kapila Dev, text 325:20 through 27, one of the verses there describes how when one becomes advanced in Krishna consciousness, he says, Tapanti bibadas tapa naitad mankata chetasa. Tapanti means to suffer, and tapan are the sufferings. In other words, we suffer a broken arm or something, whatever it is. Tapanti bibadas tapa naitad mankata chetasa. One does not feel, one may be conscious of them, but one does not feel the same kind of pain because the mind is so much absorbed in Krishna. Yeah, it's not right. In other words, it's withdrawn from the body, and so there is some of that, And ultimately, the so much of the pain is the mental part. When you get old and you're dying, what's going to happen to this? What's going to happen to this? I put so much energy in this, and it's all a mystery, and it's all very frightening. But if you're, I mean, we saw, I wasn't there, but with Rajendra Nanavu and also Shamali.
So a lot or all of the anxiety is removed.
Exactly.
That's
And that's exactly what he
So
said.
another question. Thank you. That satisfies it for sure. So, Arjuna is saying he doesn't want to fight to kill his relatives. So I get the part of, if you don't see that there's something past death, of course you're sad that this relative or this loved one, they are going to end. That is the end, and they're done. But I can, just my own experience, I lost my dad, recently. I wasn't particularly sad, and really, honestly, I wasn't sad that he died. He was 92.
Wow.
But the sadness comes from, and it's somewhat selfish, that I won't spend time with him. He won't see my daughter have a child. He won't see me. We won't have these conversations. So it's not just, I'm fine that he died.
Yeah.
But I'm still not fine because it's that thing that I'm missing. Wouldn't Arjuna respond the same? Well, okay, they're going to, live again, okay. But I still I'm going to miss them. I won't have this life to spend with them.
Well, that's also addressed at the beginning here. Another, Krishna said, he knows exactly, the situation about you. And he gives him this instruction. Dehinosmin yatade, famous verse, Komaram yad, that just as we pass in this body from childhood to adolescence, youth, and on, similarly the soul passes into another body at death. And then he says, not the self-realized soul, but he says the dhira, the self-controlled or sober person, Arjuna, is not disturbed by such a change. In other words, if you truly understand, you're not disturbed on the most basic level, which is knowing that this person is not really dying. They're going to a better place. But, as you said, there are still the pains of separation. And Lordy knows, anyone who knows, reads, you can read about it, the situation when Srila Prabhupada left us in November of '77. The devotees were just, unconsolable. There was so much weeping and crying. We don't have, Prabhupada is gone, Even knowing that he's not dead, he's with Krishna. And Krishna addresses that. He says in 2 verses later, the next verse is Mata Sparshasta Konteya. He's talking about tolerance then. Tolerance means that it hurts, but you tolerate it, that you understand, And so he first said, and then he says, Yam hinapadiyante te purusham purushasha, but this is 2:15. We're coming up soon. We may hit it this tonight. And that only one who can remain dhira and equipoised, even amongst all of the pains, emotional pains, in this case, of one's loved one departing and seeing, only such a person is eligible for liberation. Not that you don't feel it, but that you can deal with it, that you understand. Yet this is a difficult situation, and it hurts. But I understand the larger truth that this person has gone on. In the case of a devotee, gone to a better situation. He doesn't have to stay in that painful body anymore. In many cases we've had where devotees have been suffering so much, and there's that element of, you're happy that the person is free of the material body because they're going, like that. So there's a whole bunch of emotions that take place. But one has to remain dhira in that situation and not let it, like his Arjuna is not dhira now. He's let this whole emotional thing paralyze him at the moment of truth. So it's a key element now. Can Krishna, through his knowledge and preaching, bring him back to the dhira state where he's be able to tolerate the pain, even the pain of being instrumental in seeing to the departure of Bhishma and Drona, like that. So it all fits in. Okay, shall we go on? Yes, text 9. Okay. Sanjaya Vacha Eva Muktva Rishikesham Gudakesha Parantapa Nayotsya iti Govindam Uktva tushnim babuvaha. Sanjay said, having spoken thus, Arjuna chastised her enemies told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. Purport. Dhritarashtra must have been very glad to understand that Arjuna was not going to fight and was instead leaving the battlefield for the begging profession. But Sanjaya disappointed him again in relating that Arjuna was competent to kill his enemies, Parantapa. Although Arjuna was, for the time being, overwhelmed with false grief due to family affection, he surrendered unto Krishna, the supreme spiritual master, as a disciple. This indicated that he would soon be free from the false lamentation resulting from family affection and would be enlightened with perfect knowledge of self-realization or Krishna consciousness and would then surely fight. Thus Dhritarashtra's joy would be frustrated since Arjuna would be enlightened by Krishna and would fight to the end. Okay, let's go on. Tamavacha Rishikesha Pahasan Nivabharata Srenayor Madhye Vishidantam Hidam Vachaha. Now, as we read these passages here, there are going to be slight differences from what you have in the book, because we've been going over this, and so there'll be, but don't be disturbed by that, because I think if you think about it, you'll agree there are improvements. Translation: O descendant of Bharata, at that time Krishna, smiling between the two armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna. Purport: the talk was going on between intimate friends, namely Rishikesh and the Gurikesh, the Rishikesh and the Gurikesh. As friends, both of them were on the same level, but one of them voluntarily became a student of the other. Krishna was smiling because a friend had chosen to become a disciple. As Lord of all, he is always in the superior position as the master of everyone. And yet the Lord agrees to be a friend, a son, or a lover for a devotee who wants him in such a role. But when he was accepted as the master, he at once assumed the role and talked with the disciple like the master, with gravity, as it is required. It appears that the talk between the master and the disciple was openly exchanged in the presence of both armies, so that all were benefited. So the talks of the Bhagavad Gita are not for any particular person, society, or community, but they are for all, and friends or enemies are equally entitled to hear them. Now just one note on this, and that is that, because I listen to lectures every day, and Prabhupada made this point recently, is that we shouldn't think that, oh, this took place 5,000 years ago, if only we could have been there, we could have really benefited, you know. The fact, because Krishna is absolute, his words that we're reading here, and we're very fortunate to have the Sanskrit be able to chant it, are just as potent. It all depends on our receptivity, or our ability to have that faith that we're actually associated with Krishna, just like Arjuna did and all the soldiers there who were directly hearing. So the effect that these words have on us completely depends on our receptivity and our faith in them. So that's very enlivening. And Prabhupada is, you know, very adamant that when the Bhagavad Gita is presented not as it is, but for some political reason, or even just, you know, because it would be good if we had a Bhagavad Gita, so can you give us a translation so we can sell it, you know. In other words, Prabhupada is pouring out his life's blood here to present this Bhagavad Gita, you know. He went through this such a situation. He had already done this book years earlier. He had a whole manuscript. Find a publisher was not possible, but he had the manuscript. And it disappeared. Someone stole it. And I read in the Lilamrita, you know, because the Lilamrita is so vast, I forget some details, a lot of details, that Prabhupada suspected that one of his family members had done it, because he was more and more getting involved in preaching and spending less and less time at home and in business and so forth. And they were, you know, not into it. So anyway, whatever it was, he had already done the book. Can you imagine again doing it all again? It meant that Prabhupada was not doing it, you know, for some material reason. He said the absolute need that this Bhagavad Gita, which was popular already, it was known in the West, they would actually read it. He needed to do it again. So, you know, 22nd Avenue, it has that little typewriter that he's hitting. And then finally, you know, by Krishna's arrangement, they were able to get him a dictaphone, dictating machine, which would speed things up, provided you have a competent typist, you know, who can hear Prabhupada and give. So anyway, it created other difficulties, but it did speed it up, and he was able to create this Bhagavad Gita with great effort. And so we're the beneficiaries of it. And the world is the beneficiary. So, Krishna is playing the role now, not of a chariot driver, but of the supreme guru, the ultimate guru. Okay. On text 10 I'm on, right, I think? No, text 11. All right, so this is the start of Krishna's instructions now. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Ashochanam Vashochastvam Pragyavaranksha Bhashase Katasuna Katasungscha Nanusochanti Panditaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Purport. The Lord at once took the position of the teacher and chastised the student, calling him indirectly a fool. The Lord said, you are talking like a learned man, but you do not know that one who is learned, one who knows what is body and what is soul, does not lament for any stage of the body, neither in the living nor in the dead condition. As explained in later chapters, it will be clear that knowledge means to know matter, spirit, and the controller of both. This is a famous line, you can remember it. Matter, spirit, and controller of both. Arjuna argued that religious principles should be given more importance than politics or sociology. But he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul, and the Supreme is even more important than religious formularies. And because he was lacking in that knowledge, he should not have posed himself as a very learned man. As he did not happen to be a very learned man, he was consequently lamenting for something which was unworthy of lamentation. The body is born and is destined to be vanquished today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. One who knows this is actually learned, and for him there is no cause for lamentation, regardless of the condition of the material body. Now, isn't it true that oftentimes in ordinary wars, without this element of spiritual truth, that each side, they whip up the enthusiasm and the determination of the soldiers by giving them a higher reason for it. Oh, it's for the good of the country, for whatever other principles they may give them. So there's not simply you're not just focused on your own body. You're accepting a duty and a higher reality to it. Of course, that's fallacious. If nationalism, which is often means that that the commanders use and the politicians use, is one of the elements of ignorance that's described by Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra later on, when they all meet. When there's a meeting of the Vijvasis come and Krishna comes from Dwarka, they meet on this battle. So Krishna taking the role of a very pious prince, when all of these sages come, they come down to see him, and Vasudeva takes advantage of their presence, and he asks them, basically, what's the goal of life and how can I achieve it? And they're dumbstruck because Krishna is right there, the goal of life. He's got him as his son, and he's asking them what the goal of life. So Krishna, he gets in on it and says, Yasyatma buddhi kunabeti datage swadi kadatrasha bhomi jadi yatirta buddhi sadile nakarja janesha bigyesha eva gokara. So probably love to quote this verse. He says, one who considers Yasyatma buddhi that the a self is really this body composed of mucus, bile, and air. Kunape, which is nothing but a corpse, it's just a bag full of these things and complicated needs, but that's the nature of the body, and that's who I am. And who thinks that who claims possession of the body, the wife, the children, and all the extraneous, and who regards the place of his birth as worshipable. This is nationalism. And who goes to a holy place to take bath, not to inquire from the learned people who live there. If someone has all of these or some of these misconceptions, he's really no better than a cow or an ass or a donkey. In other words, he's animalistic. So this whole idea of identifying with the place of birth and which then the race and the language and all of this stuff is complete ignorance. And but it's often used as a way of inspiring soldiers to risk their lives and give their lives. So Krishna is going to inspire Arjuna to give his life, or risk his life anyway, not on the basis of the kingdom or anything, but on the basis of his relationship with Krishna. And meaning that Krishna wants it for the sole purpose of reinstituting Dharma and eliminating these demoniac forces and protecting the devotees, he says in the 4th chapter, famous verse, Parasaraya Sadhana. That's the worthy cause, and because Dharma is essential for human prosperity in life. So that's the actual goal, and that's a worthy goal of risking one's life. Of course, Arjuna will come out, victorious, but that ultimately impresses him. Krishna wants it; it's for the good of everybody. I was thinking that this would be the degradation, but I was wrong. I was having a material calculation. So that's the idea. All right, so now this famous verse, 12. Natve vaham jatu nasam natvam neme janadipaha nachaiva nabhavishyama sarve vayamatak param. Now before I read the translation, the purport, notice that this is quite a substantial purport here. And this is because Prabhupada, he goes after the Maya bodies with this. Because they say that ultimately we all merge, and Krishna is saying, no. We're all individuals in the past, in the present, and in the future. Nobody merges. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Purport. In the Vedas, in the Katha Upanishad, as well as in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer of innumerable living entities in terms of their different situations according to individual work and reaction of work. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is also, by his plenary portions, alive in the heart of every living entity. Only saintly persons who can see, within and without, the same Supreme Lord can actually attain to perfect and eternal peace. And Prabhupada has more or less given the translation of the next verse that he's quoting now. Nityo nityanam chaitanas chaitananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman tam atmastam ye nupashyanti dhiras tesham shanti shasvati netaresham. Katha Upanishad 2.2.13. You can often tell the Upanishadic verses because the meter is not exactly as strict as it is in the Gita and other books. The same Vedic truth given to Arjuna is given to all persons, and that translation of that was in the first paragraph. The same Vedic truth given to Arjuna is given to all persons in the world who pose themselves as very learned, but factually have but a poor fund of knowledge. The Lord says clearly that he himself, Arjuna, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings, and that the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living entities, both in their conditioned and in their liberated situations. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supreme individual person. And Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. It is not that they did not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality existed in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. Therefore, there is no cause for lamentation for anyone. The Mayavadi theory, that after liberation the individual soul, separated by the covering of Maya or illusion, will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence, is not supported herein by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Authority. Nor is the theory that we only think of individuality in the conditioned state supported herein. Krishna clearly says herein that in the future also, the individuality of the Lord and others, as it is confirmed in the Upanishads, will continue eternally. This statement of Krishna's is authoritative because Krishna cannot be subject to illusion. If individuality were not a fact, then Krishna would not have stressed it so much, even for the future. The Mayavadi may argue that the individuality spoken of by Krishna is not spiritual but material. Even accepting the argument that the individuality is material, then how can one distinguish Krishna's individuality? Krishna affirms his individuality in the past and confirms his individuality in the future also. He has confirmed his individuality in many ways, and impersonal Brahman has been declared to be subordinate to him. Krishna has maintained spiritual individuality all along. If he is accepted as an ordinary conditioned soul in individual consciousness, then his Bhagavad Gita has no value as authoritative scripture. A common man with all the 4 defects of human frailty is unable to teach that which is worth hearing. The Gita is above such literature. No mundane book, now just before we go on, the 4 defects are imperfect senses, therefore we make mistakes and become illusioned, and we cheat by teaching what is false as true. Those 4 principles. The Gita is above. No mundane book compares with the Bhagavad Gita. When one accepts Krishna as an ordinary man, the Gita loses all importance. The Mayavadi argues that the plurality mentioned in this verse is conventional and that it refers to the body. But previous to this verse, such a bodily conception is already condemned. After condemning the bodily conception of the living entities, how is it possible for Krishna to place a conventional proposition on the body again? Therefore, individuality is maintained on spiritual grounds and is thus confirmed by great acharyas like Sri Ramanuja and others. We should mention here Madhvacharya, whose disappearance day is today. All glories to Madhvacharya. It is clearly mentioned in many places in the Gita that this spiritual individuality is understood by those who are devotees of the Lord. Those who are envious of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead have no bona fide access to the great literature. The non-devotee's approach to the teachings of the Gita is something like that of a bee licking on the bottle of a honey. One cannot have a taste of honey unless one opens the bottle. Similarly, the mysticism of the Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees, and no one else can taste it. As it is stated in the 4th chapter of the book, nor can the Gita be touched by persons who envy the very existence of the Lord. Therefore, the Mayavadi explanation of the Gita is a most misleading presentation of the whole truth. Lord Chaitanya has forbidden us to read commentation made by the Mayavadis and warns that one who takes to such an understanding of the Mayavadi philosophy loses all power to understand the real mystery of the Gita. If individuality refers to the empirical universe, then there is no need of teaching by the Lord. The plurality of the individual soul and the Lord is an eternal fact, and it is confirmed in the Vedas as above mentioned. So, now, just to look at it from a little different perspective, why is it that faith in Krishna's words, is prerequisite to understanding this philosophy? And the answer is that ultimately the final arbiter, if you will, the final force that's working in bhakti is revelation. It's Krishna at every step. If you're chanting a little sincerely and trying to concentrate, whatever nectar you're going to be experiencing, that's coming from Krishna. He's recognizing your efforts. He's giving you encouragement. If you're approaching the Bhagavad Gita as some kind of a treatise by an ordinary person spoken at a certain time, then you can't enter into it. Because as Prabhupada explains so nicely in this purport, the prerequisite for really getting the benefit is, if you will, at least suspending our disbelief and accepting Krishna as an absolute source of knowledge. Otherwise, it's just another idea. It's just somebody else's speculation, and we're locked off from getting the benefit of the Bhagavad Gita. That's why Krishna says in the end here, in the end of the Gita, probably often quotes. Forgive me, my ankles give me a little trouble here. Bhaktya mava vijanati yavanyaschasmi tattvataha. It's a key phrase. By bhakti alone can one understand me in truth as I am. Because Krishna has this power to lower this curtain of Maya, so that someone will think, oh, it's just an idol, it's a historical figure. It's just one more speculation on the truth. This is a free country. Our idea is just as good as anyone. You hear that a lot. But as soon as you have that mentality, then your idea is confirmed for you. For you, Krishna remains an idol or a speculation, a mythical figure. So this is why the role of the Mahajan is so important. The great soul who's realized and can give us evidence of what the life of and the words and the being of someone who has realized this really are. And this is what Prabhupada gave us. Giving us his own presence was equally as important as giving us the books. They go together. Because of who Prabhupada was, therefore devotees started chanting. And because they started chanting sincerely, a little bit sincerely, Krishna from within was giving them real detachment from all the craziness that they had been attached to, and attachment to Krishna. Kirtans and so many things, there's some bliss there. There's no question about it. It's real. Is love real? Is depression real? Of course. We experience it all the time. Why? I can't see it. I can't, smell it. I can't weigh it. Well, this realization of Krishna is also just as real, and more real, really. So this purport is critical to understand. In the verse, never was a time without that exists. We all existed in the past. We're going through a temporary body situation now. That one small chapter in a very long book. But we have an opportunity to end the book of our constant, births and deaths in this material world, and go back to that eternal blissful life with Krishna, if we accept it and we're free of envy. That's explained in the second verse of Bhagavatam. Understood by the non-envious. Nirmatsaranam satam vedyam. This Bhagavatam is understood by those who are not envious of Krishna and trying to compete with him and like that. All right, we have time for one more comment or question, local or remote. Vijay, you there?
Yes, I am here.
Do you have something tonight?
Of course I have.
Okay, we're ready for you.
Yes, Dravida Prabhu, thank you very much. You're very kind. Prabhu, you know better than me that when Lord Krishna comes to the material world, he has three purposes: deliver the pious, annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion. Yeah. So, based on this, my question is as follows. Why is it that what I see happening on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, it is exactly the opposite? Because you know better than me that Bhishma Dev is one of the 12 Mahajanas. And who better than a Mahajana to help Lord Krishna deliver the pious, annihilate the miscreants, and to reestablish the principles of religion. So why is it, my question is, why is it that I find Lord Krishna asking Arjuna, who was there acting as a gentleman, because he knew very well that he was in the presence of one of the 12 Mahajanas. And although Bhishma was there trying to rob the throne from Yudhishthir, the brother of Arjuna, still he was one of the 12 Mahajanas. And because of that, Arjuna, because he was a gentleman, he said, no, I cannot kill
Vijay, you're many miles away. You're not so attuned to the time factor here, but we're coming up. We don't have time to.
Yes, I know.
But a short answer is that Bhishma also participated very essentially in reestablishing the Dharma, because you remember after the battle, Yudhishthir was disconsolate because of all the death. Well, not only the men, but the elephants and the horses and everything. He couldn't be consoled. Now Krishna was there, but instead of consoling him himself, they all went to where Bhishma was on the bed of arrows and ready to depart. And then he instructed Yudhishthir for days, wasn't it days in the Mahabharata? It's a huge section of the book, of not only giving him, wiping away his depression and giving him transcendental knowledge, but also very practical knowledge in the running of the kingdom. And Krishna was just standing there watching. And then Bhishma Dev, then the time came, don't forget he had the blessing, he could leave whenever he wanted. So then he, after instructing, he had these beautiful prayers, which I love to chant. He's describing Krishna there, and then the end of the prayer, several of them are, let my love, let my attraction be drawn only to Krishna. This is the Mahajan. So he fulfilled the role of a Mahajan. And that was that he gave this instruction to Yudhishthira, who was going to be Dharma personified and helping. And he showed perfectly how to leave the body, focus completely on Krishna, because he had the opportunity to see Krishna directly, but to glorify and be completely free of any anxiety or fear in his departure. So he showed by his example, Mahajano yena gata sapanta. That's the Mahabharata verse. You can't understand what to do, again, establish Dharma by argument, by becoming a great rishi, because rishis have to differ with each other, or studying the Vedas, because they also seem to differ. The only way is to follow in the footsteps and the example of the great Mahajans, which, as you pointed out, Bhishma Dev was one. And that's as far as we can take it tonight. Maybe we can resume on Monday.
No, Prabhu, as usual, breathtaking answer to my
I
question.
can hardly breathe. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.